The first step to overcoming something is admittance. That's why I don't mind saying it. I have no friends. Or at least I didn't when I was 11 years old. Any description of my childhood sounds like a conversation with a therapist, so I'll save you the details. For context, I was raised by a single mother who longed to be child-free. I didn't know my father until I was 20 and went looking for him, and what I found made me regret the search. Since the age of 4, I was bullied severely. I was a magnet for it, and I had a black eye more often than not. I can't even pretend that there was one kid who looked out for me, one kind soul in my corner. There really wasn't. For a decade, I'd spend every recess sitting on my own. I felt invisible, like a ghost. Not even the teachers seemed to care and would always ignore my raised hand in class. Sometimes I could go days without speaking a word to anyone. I had one solace during this period of my life, and that was horror. The entire genre was a safety blanket I could wrap myself in. In my free time, I would read any horror book I could find. I felt like an addict at times, always looking for a fix, always trying to up the dose. I would often sneak downstairs at night and watch reruns of old horror flicks on cable TV. Sometimes, when my mother was wine drunk enough, she'd let me curl up on the sofa next to her, and we'd watch one together. Although infrequent, they were the happiest memories of my childhood. Naturally, Halloween was the only day I had ringed in my calendar. It was when I felt the most at home, most understood. I wished for that feeling every day, but was glad nonetheless that it came even 24 hours a year. October of 2008 was the first year I'd get to truly live out my Halloween fantasy. My mother made the executive decision that I was now allowed to trick-or-treat without her supervision, as long as I didn't go too far and I came back by curfew. I agreed excitedly, and I spent every day from August onward counting down the hours until the big night. When my Garfield-themed calendar finally landed on the 31st, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. My costume was perfected. I was going to spend the day as Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I made the mask myself from paper mache, and that coupled with the yellow apron and plastic chainsaw really brought the whole thing together. Now, I was extremely scrawny, even for the standards of my age, but I like to think I pulled it off. I ate breakfast in it, I carved pumpkins in it, and even went out to the store to pick candy in it. While perusing the quickly emptying shelves of sweets, I walked past one of the bullies at my school. He didn't notice me. I felt invisible again, but this time in a way I wanted. I picked out a nice, classic collection of candy, and when I got home, I filled a few bowls to the brim. I instructed my mother on the importance of trick-or-treat maintenance, explaining that if she leaves them unguarded for too long, they'll be ransacked. She assured me she would, and waved me off without looking away from the TV. The street lights were magic. Hordes of costumed kids paraded around, all carrying sacks of slowly filling goodies. There were some good ones too, I admit, but I was confident I had the best costume of all, even if it was slightly ruined by the inhaler necklace. I wandered the streets on my own, drifting from door to door and lining my pumpkin-themed bucket with candy. I felt free. A little later on in the night, I started to tail this group of kids my age, but from a different school. I followed a few steps behind them for a while, until an older boy, dressed as Beetlejuice, turned around and told me to fuck off. Disheartened and feeling an asthma attack coming on, I sat down by one of the park benches near the green and took my mask off. I wiped the sweat away and took a bang on my inhaler. Just before I got ready to carry on my merry way, I heard a familiar voice yell my least favorite nickname. "Hey look, it's Dick Nose." My ears curled over as I looked everywhere, noticing a few kids in my class loitering around the nearest gazebo. Vern, a rotund 13-year-old in a skin-tight Spider-Man outfit, yelled and pointed at me. A minute later, I was running for my life with a gaggle of murderous tweens chasing after me. My pumpkin bucket of treats fell from my hand, spilling its content into the forest ferny floor. I knew I couldn't risk going back there for it, and kept running. I glanced around as I did, and saw that half of the mob had split off to salvage my lost goods. The two who kept chasing me put up a good show, but eventually I lost them in the trees. After a while of walking in circles, I realized I'd lost myself too. Panic soon set in. My longing to live out a horror movie meant that I was acutely aware of the urban legends of my hometown. I knew that the woods I'd stumbled into were haunted. The year was 1978, according to most legends. A boy was made to keep an eye on his kid brother while he went trick-or-treating, but instead dragged him along to the high school Halloween party. It was out in the forest, far away from anyone who'd judge their underage drinking. A great bonfire was lit, and the teens danced around it all night long. Near midnight, the young boy became anxious, demanding he'd be taken home. His older brother, now drunk for the first time in his life, just shoved him aside. The younger boy stumbled into the flames, his linen clown costume catching fire in the blink of an eye. All the teens could do was watch as he burned to death in front of them. He's been seen every Halloween since, wandering around the forest with charred skin, colorful fabric melting into the flesh, and emitting an orange glow. For some reason, my mind decided to tell itself this story as I walked. I was so bitterly on edge that every bird's cry or a snapping twig almost sent me into cardiac arrest. The limp green glow stick I held out barely lit the way as darkness enveloped me from either side. As I walked, I began to notice a faint glow deep within the mess of trees. My hands shook as my body carried me toward it. A voice in the back of my head screamed at me not to, that it meant certain death at the hands of a demon child. Still, I moved. Passing deformed trees that twisted into disturbingly humanoid silhouettes, I was now almost upon the source of the glow. Stumbling through the foliage, I came out into a clearing of grass, which was soon replaced by gravel. Right there, in the center of it all, was a house. I thanked God for making the forest spit me out directly into safety. A warm glow came from the downstairs windows, and the stacks of lit jack-o'-lanterns made the whole thing even more welcoming. I made my way with confidence up the front steps to the front door. I knocked twice and waited. After some time, it was answered, cautiously at first before swinging open. A man stood in the entrance. I remember that he looked to be in his 30s and had very soft features. His hair had the color of wet sand and was thinning. He wore a green cardigan vest, slacks, and a wide smile. He reminded me of my grandfather, despite his youth. "Hi," he said gleefully. "I'm Edward. What's your name?" "Hello, I'm Eric," I said, grinning back at him. "Well, Eric, I must say, I love your costume," Edward exclaimed. "Thanks," I said, before realizing I was still holding the mask down by my side. I quickly put it on and looked back up at Edward. "Eek," he said, somewhat condescendingly. Then, after a moment of silence, he spoke again. "Would you like some candy? You're the first trick-or-treater at my door all night. I might as well give you the entire bucket." "Really?" I said, excited. Then I realized my limitations. "I don't have anything to carry it with." "No worries," Edward replied smoothly. "Come inside and we'll sort something out." Having a mother who relied on strangers to raise her kid dispelled any notion of stranger danger I might have picked up in my youth. For me, it was the people I knew who I had to be afraid of. As such, I happily followed Edward inside and into his living room. He directed me to sit down on the beige leather sofa in front of a table piled high with candy. The colorful, old-fashioned wrappers seemed to call my name. I sat still, waiting for permission to dig in. "Hold on, buckaroo," Edward said, before putting a hand on my shoulder briefly before sinking down into the adjacent armchair. "Can I really have all this?" I asked him in a pleading tone. "You sure can," he replied. "Every last bit." Suddenly, he leapt to his feet again. "You know who'd just love to meet you?" he asked me. I paused, expecting the question to be rhetorical. When he just stood there, frozen, in the same position, with a white grin and intense eyes, I realized I actually had to answer before he moved on. No?" I replied. "My mother," he informed me. "She loves company, especially from younger, polite boys. Wait here while I go get her." Before I could respond, he disappeared out of the living room. I tried to listen out for his footsteps, but they seemed to stop as soon as he was out of view. I leaned back in the seat and looked around. The room, as did the rest of the house from what little I saw, had a very earthy theme. Lots of dark greens and browns. I noticed the thick cluster of taxidermied animals that spread around the room, which began to deeply unnerve me. I could feel the glassy eyes of dozens of dead mammals fixed on me. I began to sweat. The room was pretty dimly lit, and so I leaned over to the lamp on the rustic wooden stand beside the sofa. I flicked it on, illuminating more of the room. The pile of candy glistened with a new intensity. I couldn't imagine why Edward would care if I took one now, so I leaned over and pinched a small, pink-wrapped piece from the mountainous pile. I held it in my palm, feeling how hard it was. I noticed the wrapper looked like it had already been peeled back. I remember thinking I heard a noise and looked up. Surveying the room around me, I couldn't find the source. I shrugged and went back to ogling the candy. I gently tore back the wrapper in my hand, wondering what flavor it would be. It was a human tooth. A molar, to be exact. It was stained yellow, and I couldn't stop staring at it. I kept it in the palm of my hand, my shock and disgust mixing to create a powerful paralytic. "Ooh, lucky, you got one with some gum," Edward said as he closed in on me. I yelled out like an injured dog and threw the tooth on the floor. I fell backward against the sofa when I saw his mother. I crawled quickly away from the nightmare duo, trying to put as much space between them and me as I could. My hand brushed against something rough and protruding as I reached the other side of the couch. Looking down at the beige leather, I noticed a nipple looking up at me. "Where are you going?" Edward cooed. He held his mother upright by his side as he approached me, his loafers brushing over the shag rug that looked a little too like a giant wig. His mother looked almost like a storefront mannequin in the right light. She was a doll, essentially. A poorly shaped human figure was stitched together from similar beige leather, although it seemed more worn down. Judging from a few busted seams, she appeared to be stuffed with the same material the rug was made from. Her face, its face, was black and featureless. Although it lacked a mouth, nose, and eyes, it was still smeared heavily with makeup in the approximate location. I gagged when I noticed the two ears sewn into place on either side of the head, one noticeably darker in tone than the other. I fell from the couch, landing hard on the rustic wooden floor. Edward kept walking calmly toward me, holding his mother like he was helping an elderly woman walk. I got to my feet, walking back against the nearest wall in fear. "Oh, don't be afraid, Eric. We're friends," Edward said, now standing almost directly in front of me. "Come with me, and I'll introduce you to the rest of my family." I let out a shrill scream that tore its way through my throat. A dose of adrenaline hit my brain as I grabbed a taxidermied raccoon with bulging eyes from the low shelf by my side. I spun around, slamming its heavy wooden base against the window behind me. Part of it shattered, and I took a leap of faith, jumping through the window and onto the shrubbery beneath. I limped to my feet, staggering away as fast as I could from the glow of the house. I made my way across the gravel of the driveway, trying to put as much distance between me and the house as possible. Just before I made it to the barely paved road that led into the forest, I looked back. The door was wide open, and Edward stood not 50 yards away from me. The light behind him turned his form into a detailed silhouette. His right arm was thrown over the shoulder of his mother. His left was clutching the doll's wrist and held it above his head. He was waving it back and forth as if to bid me farewell. This happened almost 17 years ago, so forgive me for my foggy memory of what followed. I kept running as best I could down the graveled track, which eventually turned into a dirt path, which became increasingly overgrown. After following the path for what seemed like days, I eventually emerged from the tree line to a main road. I made it back into town just after sunrise, still scared and shivering. A cop picked me up and let me stay in the station with a blanket and a warm drink while she tried to contact my mother. During those few hours, I explained everything in as much detail as I could. Finally, my mother did come pick me up, but not before the cops had taken an official written statement of my account. Of course, that wasn't the last I heard. The local police found Edward and arrested him in relation to 3 missing persons cases, dating back almost a decade. From what I could gather, he's now serving a lengthy sentence somewhere out of our small county. The detail that still keeps me up at night, however, isn't the knowledge that I sat in the front room of a sadistic killer when I was just 11 years old. What keeps me up at night is the fact that, despite their comprehensive search of the entire property, they never found the doll. The end. This poor boy has been through so much. He was finally allowed to trick-or-treat on his own, the only rule being that he had to come home before curfew. I wasn't allowed to go out like that as a child, but wouldn't a normal curfew be like around the evening or something? Eric was out there until sunrise and his mom didn't even notice. The police had to contact her. It should have been the other way around. The poor boy, he probably won't even eat candy anymore. I know I wouldn't. And thank you to the White Mare for letting me read your story. The link to their story can be found in the description. Also, they informed me that they'll be posting more stories on Reddit in this universe, and that they're all interconnected in some way. It'll be really interesting to see how they pull that off. Don't forget to like the video if you liked it, or dislike it if you didn't. And if you're not already subscribed, what the heck? I post videos twice a week, every week, so if you don't want to miss out on some fresh spooky stories, consider subscribing. Anyway, that's all for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching and making it this far. Bye bye bye.